This is the Volvo Ocean Race, the story of a 45-year obsession. Sailing's iconic race around the world, the ultimate test of a team, and the place where elite sport meets human adventure. Achieving victory will mean dominating a 45,000 nautical mile race over 11 legs, taking in 12 host cities across 6 continents. The route is a throwback to the early years of the race, with long weeks spent in the remote and vast Southern Ocean. It's predicted to be one of the toughest and closest races for decades, with all the teams using identical Volvo Ocean 65 yachts. So the only difference in performance comes from the skill, dedication, and teamwork of the crew. With no prize money at stake, just the chance to see their names engraved on the trophy and join an elite few who can say they did it. Lisbon, Portugal, and the scene for the start of Leg 2, the 7,000 nautical mile 3-week marathon to Cape Town, South Africa. In Leg 1, it was Vestas 11th Hour Racing who took line honours, but skipper Charlie Enright knew he couldn't just sit back and relax.
You're constantly learning. I mean, if you're not evolving, if you stay static, someone else out there is, and you find yourself behind. So you got to constantly improve to stay on top. The focus is on Leg 2 now.
Also on the podium were Mafre, led by Xabi Fernandez, and Dongfeng Race Team, headed up by Charles Cordrelia. They just managed to scrape their 3rd spot after a poor performance earlier in the leg.
I was thinking, where are we going to finish if we are so slow? Why are we so slow? And if you want to win this race, I don't think it's possible to win all the legs. The goal is to be always on the podium, and if you achieve that, I imagine you will be in a very strong position when you arrive for the last few legs.
It was Team AkzoNobel who had denied the podium spot.
You're sailing against the team that's probably the best prepared of all of us in this race, Dongfeng. Of course, it feels sour that they just take you by a few miles on the finish line.
5th spot went to Sun Hung Kai Scallywag, a good result for the Hong Kong-based team. Although there was drama on the finish line as navigator Steve Hales was struck by the boom. It didn't look good, but Hales made a full recovery. Coming back for his 8th attempt to win the race is Bauer Becking, heading up Team Brunel. But despite 3 decades of Volvo Ocean Race experience, his team only just managed to not come last in the first leg. Turn the Tide on Plastic, led by T. Kafari, were last. The team have the largest share of youth sailors of any boat within the fleet, and for many of these rookies, Leg 2 will be the longest they have ever been at sea.
We don't know what to expect. There's so many variables out there and being on the ocean. We'll just have to get out there and see what comes and hopefully deal with it in a good way that means we can keep performing and keep up there with some of the best guys in the world.
This race can change us. It will be really long and tough. We will feel lots of emotions.
I'm expecting hard times. It's going to be an adventure, physically and mentally.
Probably the toughest experience I will have in my life, so I think I will become a different man after 9 months.
Having a wealth of experience counts for so much at this top level of offshore ocean racing. It's why Simeon Teampoint, the skipper of Team AkzoNobel, decided to add more pedigree to his crew for Leg 2. He's taken on Jules Salter as his navigator, Peter van Newkirk and Chris Nicholson. In the last edition of the race, Nicholson was the skipper of Vestas Wind, and Teampoint sailed with him on the last 2 legs. Now it's a role reversal, and Nicholson has to get up to speed fast.
You're trying to get yourself on a personal level ready, whilst also trying to, fit into the team and understand where the team's at, and also trying to improve as well. So several kind of fronts to deal with, in a 24-hour period to be ready for the first night, driving the boat downhill in 30 knots.
Lisbon is a city steeped in maritime history, and today it continues its heritage as these modern-day explorers prepare to head out into the vast expanse of ocean. The farewells are said, some unspoken, as the fleet slip their moorings and the comfort of land for almost 3 weeks at sea. attention diverts to the task ahead and the race itself.
Here we go for the start of leg 2. From Lisbon to Cape Town, down into the South Atlantic. It is go, go, go.
It's going to be one of the most epic starts this leg has ever seen. This is what the Volvo Ocean Race is all about.
This iconic leg will see the team sail from Lisbon through the North Atlantic, crossing the equator, picking up the trade winds and venturing into the Southern Ocean before the finish in Cape Town. Within 15 minutes of the start, the fleet was already seeing over 30 knots of wind speed. There was no easing into the leg. It was full gas, hang on, in a 4-metre Atlantic swell.
The forecast is wet and wild.
We are now full speed in 30 to 35 knot speed, quite intense.
Coming into the storm, it's great sailing conditions.
A few issues on board. We got a big leak in the nav station and we've wiped out our main navigation computer, which is pretty annoying 7 hours into a 21-day leg.
The sharp and honed crews of Mafre and Dongfeng race team blasted into the lead, recording boat speeds of nearly 33 knots. Even for old hands of the race, it was a shock to the system.
So it is funny, like physically all those little muscles that haven't been used for a while driving. I reckon I had a moment or two on the first night where it's like, whoa, driving, but settled down, just like riding a bike.
For others, it was like their first bike ride.
We were ploughing down waves. It was a pretty heinous sea state.
It was chaos and it was a bit of a baptism of fire for my guys. There was no gentle start to leg 2.
Try to manage the no sleeping hours, the wet all the time, and I know that things can get much worse, so try to take the most of it even in the darkest hours.
Just got to hang on for dear life, really. Down below, it's pretty dangerous. If you're not hanging on, you just get flown across the boat.
Had a few life jackets in fleet under the pressure of the water. People were physically exhausted, and then we came to doing some jives, so it's a massive, massive effort. The sails are waterlogged, full of water. You've got to move them forward, use the coat roof as much as you can to help, lifting 100 kilos of sails over to the other side. Just imagine that for 3 weeks and slightly colder temperatures, and you've got an idea of the Southern Ocean.
The leg from Lisbon to Cape Town is notoriously difficult to navigate, and the first obstacle all the fleet were faced with was which side to pass the island of Madeira. The entire fleet jibed to the west.
Lo que ahí no podemos hacer con Madeira es pasar directamente hacia el sur porque atravesaríamos el despuente de la isla, que es enorme. Sí, yo creo que vamos todos más o menos en el barco, estamos haciendo parecido. Toda la flota ha venido a buscar esta aceleración de Madeira. Y ahora es ir jugando con los roles.
The fleet continued to head in a more southwesterly direction. No one wanted to head too far east and come out of the pressure, and more importantly, sail too far from their competitors. Lead changes started to develop, and Vestas 11th Hour Racing got ahead, but were feeling nervous.
Like it just turned into like a mist.
We've got good wind, gone forward on the guys who are behind us, but we're feeling a little exposed on the east. Potential for lighter wind, so the conservative thing to do right now is put a little jibe in, get a little bit more westing. It does mean giving up some of our lead, but I think in the fullness of time, it'll be the safer option.
Chasing Vestas 11th Hour Racing and not far behind were Dongfeng race team, who had spent the most time on the water training in the lead up to the start of the race. They had also assembled some of the most experienced offshore sailors in the world, including a Volvo Ocean Race legend who has won the trophy 3 times.
I'm lucky enough to be on watch with Stu Bannatyne, aka Magic Stu. When it's heavy weather downwind sailing, that's the man you want on the wheel. Yeah, the boat just smokes when he's driving.
It's mostly about just trying to be accurate and small movements. A bit like when you're driving a car really fast. Just use very small movements on the wheel. It's the same thing when you're driving the boat really fast. but otherwise it's just a bit of a feel for it.
I wanted someone with experience to go in the south, and this guy did 8 times the Volvo Ocean Race, so he's probably one of the guys in the world who has raced more in the Southern Ocean, so that's why he's so strong.
After 4 days at sea, Dongfeng race team took control and a new order established itself. Mafre, Vestas 11th Hour Racing and Team Akzo Nobel stuck with the leaders, but turned the tide on plastic and Sun Hunkai's Scallywag were way behind and frustrations were clear to see.
This sort of slow, steady loss is hard for everyone on board to swallow. My biggest fear is putting the boat somewhere and, you know, negating everybody's hard work on board. And honestly, at the moment, I think, you know, we're not happy with where we are, but, you know, we will make gains.
In the middle of the two groups sat Team Brunel. Although they weren't in the mix of the leading boats, their spirits were lifted with news from the shore. Rookie Peter Burling had been named World Sailor of the Year for his role helming Emirates Team New Zealand to an America's Cup win in Bermuda earlier in the year.
It's just a small part of, you know, a 90-person team, and you know, it's absolutely awesome, you know, what they managed to achieve. So, no, it's pretty cool.
To win any yacht race, you have to physically sail the boat well, that's a given. But if any errors are made in communication between navigator and crew, the results can be disastrous. Team Akzo Nobel were feeling the pain.
We've made a lot of silly losses, and then we've coughed up like 6 miles. We, you know, should have been second, sort of back and forth.
Bit of a miscommunication between the, I guess my fault really, between me and the watch who were on to try and not lose too much bearing or separation with the boats who were just to weather of us, but stupidly I went and had a lie down for a couple of hours, and when I came on deck their boats had sailed off over the horizon, so basically just drag racing now down to the doldrums.
The doldrums is a low pressure area from 5 degrees north to 5 degrees south of the equator, notorious for fickle winds and slow progress. And as the fleet approached the infamous region, the breeze eased and the boats compressed. At one point, just 30 miles separated first from 5th place. Crews had to pick their way through the localized cloud systems, making navigation a nightmare.
The cloud giveth and the cloud taketh away, and the clouds have come back to bite us a little bit here. We had a 10-mile lead on Mafre that we just watched like disintegrate before our very eyes.
First thing you need to know if it's a raining cloud or a dry cloud. If it's a raining cloud, the rain expels some air every side of the cloud, and when it's not raining, the cloud sucks the air inside. So it's completely different effect. When you can, you try to go on the good side of the cloud.
Charles Caudrelier and his Chinese team still led as they exited the doldrums. The next milestone in the race was crossing the equator.
Where are they? Where?
Welcome to the Equator Crossing ceremony for the Dongfeng race team.
Ancient maritime tradition says that any new sailor passing the equator for the first time have to be inducted into King Neptune's court. Rotten food and new hairstyles are usual forfeits.
I'm glad I'm in a club, or whatever it is.
The fleet were now in the southern hemisphere and charging ahead in the trade winds in leg 2 of the Volvo Ocean Race. Dongfeng race team continued their dominance. Mafre, Vestas 11th Hour Racing and Team Brunel were not far behind, all in a multi-boat battle to try and catch the leaders. After thousands of miles, they were match racing. With one designed boat, the margin of any technical advantage is slim. The key to winning is how the boat is sailed, and if there is one person where that responsibility lies heavily, it's the navigator. To qualify to take on this role in the Volvo Ocean Race, you have to be at the top of your game. Bauer Becking's right-hand man is a 6-race veteran, Andrew Cape.
We're trying to beat other boats, so there's other competitors out here, and to get an advantage on them, we've got to take advantage of the environment. This is the wind, the waves, the current. We use the communication equipment for Inmarsat to get in weather and interpreting that weather information, and then look at the full picture, and then you blend that in with the competition element of where the fleet are. Well, I gather the information and interpret it. So, and as navigator, I'll communicate that straight to the skipper. But who will make the final call. I'm just going to go on deck and tell the helmsman where to go. So it all goes through the skipper.
You see, I'm talking a fair bit with him. He asks questions, what do you feel? But in the end, that's his responsibility, and that's what I always said, like 80% of the decisions weather-wise will be taken by Katie, because that's his job. Above all, he has a really good understanding of how a boat is sailed. With computers, he's excellent. He's a numbers guy, and he has a very good understanding of the weather.
While the leaders were heading southwest to find more wind, Team AkzoNobel decided to sail east, effectively cutting the corner to Cape Town. Far less miles to the finish line, but also potentially less wind.
Hopefully a great opportunity ahead of us to separate ourselves a little bit more from the fleet to the inside. Always a bit of risk when you sail away from the others.
Sun Hung Kai Scallywag and Turn the Tide on Plastic were in their own jewel, just meters separating them at times.
So they can't shake them up at the moment, they keep coming at us, you know. But that's all right. It's good two-boat testing.
With around 2,500 miles left to Cape Town, all the teams started to position themselves to pick up a large South Atlantic depression that would hopefully carry them to the finish line. It was a critical time as the leading boats decided when to jibe.
Of course, with this moment of the jibe, the fleet's been separated a little bit, and we could see already almost 80 miles of separation with Dongfeng. So I think we are in a good position.
Dongfeng race team stayed longer in the east than their rivals before making their move. The consequences soon became clear. The pressure showing on navigator Pascal Bediggery.
Après is 89 miles, 244.
89.
89? Yeah. So we are completely.
Despite leading for most of the leg, they had now dropped to 4th place.
It's very sad because after 2 weeks of leading the fleet and sailing really well, we did a small, big mistake which cost us 80 miles, 100 miles to Mapfre.
Mapfre now led, with Team Brunel chasing in 2nd spot. This leg continued to be a war of navigation, and a ridge of high pressure started to cut the entire fleet in half. The leading group further south and in good breeze, the trailing 3 boats locked in their own battle, more north, losing ground by the hour and suffering.
AkzoNobel, who were south of us, looked like they might have just slipped off the back a little bit, which means they're in a worse wind direction, and we just made an 18-mile gain on them.
Well, disappointing. Just hard 48 hours. So at the moment we're in the back of the bag.
You just got to keep your head down and keep working as hard as we can to try and give ourselves a chance to get back into it at the finish.
And that never give up attitude is a mantra for all the crews. Mapfre were now under attack and knew it.
We just kept the lead with 25-30 miles, and we really hope now to stretch again a little bit, and hopefully tomorrow we have a better lead.
The Spanish team had sailed more than 6,000 nautical miles and just 37 miles separated 4th to 1st. And Dongfeng race team were on a charge, grinding their way back into 2nd.
We've managed to get ourselves out of a pretty bad situation and sailed ourselves to what is the front of the fleet, and now we just got to keep fighting hard to maintain that position until the finish.
The last 3 boats were now all engulfed by lighter airs, leaving them with a grim decision, whether to try and push on towards Cape Town or head south to find more wind. The mental strain began to tell.
It's honestly the most complicated thing I think I've seen. I'm not kidding you.
It's been a tough leg. Still got a fair way to go. But it's always quite hard when you don't really have the option of winning or running in the top 3. You're making decisions to minimise the damage rather than have success. That's always a difficult thing.
Well, we jibed. The others are still basically pointing at Cape Town, and we're not, which obviously makes you quite uneasy. So now we're just looking to see if they jibe as well.
Although the approach to Cape Town in South Africa is notoriously tricky, Mapfre held off the chasing pack. Approaching the finish line, the Spanish team were able to banish the demons of their last visit to Cape Town, arriving last in 2014-15. This time, they bathed in their victory.
Super happy. This is, for us, first leg was very good already. being second in Lisbon, but of course it's winning here and winning the first long leg is very happy, very proud. Of course the team worked like a watch and both very good and everything very well.
Dongfeng race team were unable to close the gap to win. They simply ran out of time. But they could have been off the podium altogether.
We made a fantastic comeback, so well done to Mapfre. They did less mistakes than us. We did a big one and we lost the first place, but it was an amazing comeback.
Vestas 11th Hour Racing completed the podium. Combined with their leg 1 win, they remain a top threat.
It was a tough battle all the way down here. Not satisfied with kind of how we're sailing the boat, so we got a lot of work to do, but we're making up for lost time and just keep chipping away.
Team Brunel were too far back to realistically challenge the leaders, but improved on their leg 1 performance. As they were finishing, another race was still playing out hundreds of miles offshore. Team AkzoNobel turned the tide on plastic, and Sun Hunkai Scallywag were locked in a 3-way battle not to be last. Frustration's hard to contain.
If you finish last, you basically could have delivered the boat. So you put a lot of effort in, a lot of work for just coming, last. So we're fighting really hard to be 5th instead of 7th.
Of course, we're going to push. We're pushing for 5th place. I think that's the most realistic option.
To the tide's 2 miles. Let's go another 2 in front of them. 4 miles between 3 boats. We're at the wrong end of the 3 boats.
Team AkzoNobel held off the 2 chasing boats to secure 5th. It was far from the podium, but a victory in its own right. Turn the Tide on Plastic couldn't defend their 6th place against Sun Hunkai Scallywag. After weeks of battling with David Witt and his crew, Di Cafari's team finally lost their spot, incredibly, by just over 1 minute.
To come down to 1 minute and 8 seconds says a lot after 7,000 miles of racing. You don't normally get that with the back markers, and the Glory Boys got in their podium positions, but I think everyone was quite enthralled with our story because it has gone on for so long. There isn't a single day in the Southern Hemisphere where we didn't see them in person or see them on AIS. That's how close we've been.
After nearly 3 weeks and more than 7,000 nautical miles of tough ocean racing, Leg 2 was complete. Mapfre moved to the top of the overall leaderboard, just 1 point ahead of Vestas 11th Hour Racing. Dongfeng Race Team a further 2 points down. Now it was time for all the crews to enjoy Cape Town, an iconic stopover which feels like home for many in the race, having hosted 10 times since the original in 1973. Next up, and the fleet head to Melbourne, Australia and go back to the roots of this iconic race. More Southern Ocean.